Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today's topic is a reflection on a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the hadith says, a Muslim is someone who wants for his brother what he wants for himself. And if you know Prophet Muhammad, he would also have meant a Muslim is someone who wants for her sister what she wants for herself, or wants for her brother what she wants for herself. This is a universal statement, originally given in masculine pronouns, but the spirit of the statement is universal. So a Muslim is someone who wants for others what he or she wants for herself or himself. And the reflection on this is that it brings up ideas of what is self, what is other, what is community, what is family. And we have to start by thinking, well, how does the self develop? When a child is growing up, from a psychological point of view, it has a very self-centered energy and desire and dynamic and direction. The child is exploring, putting things in its mouth, touching, grabbing, feeling, just a sensory exploration of the whole world, and everything is about that child. If you as a child pick up a toy and someone takes away that toy, the child is surprised, upset, crying, because on some level it identifies itself with that toy that it was holding. And so it's like someone has taken away something very precious, very sacred from that child. And so that kind of focus point is the self of that child. The circle of concern is the self of that child. And as it grows, it starts thinking of others first, parents, and then other children, and then others outside of its experience and influence, like teachers and other family members and neighbors and so on. And it starts to develop a kind of self versus others. And in that, its development happens very slowly and very gradually. And in certain ways, it hardens so that the self that it's always trying to protect becomes this very sacred and precious and an important thing, whereas the preciousness and the sacredness and the importance of others takes a secondary role. And what happens is that we have situations where the self becomes ultimately the one that the person is always trying to satisfy, the one that the person is always trying to lift up in the eyes of others, the one that is that the person is trying to make sure that people understand that this self is the one that has done things, caused things, made things happen, achieved things, accomplished things, and so on. And what does that do to a person when they are on a spiritual path? Well, very often the spiritual path first starts teaching them, you're going to have this very deep concern about yourself. How do I look? How do I look in the eyes of others? Do they think I'm important? Do they think I'm someone worth knowing? Do they think I'm someone worth standing next to, being drawn into your circle of influence? And business leaders and political leaders definitely capitalize on this because they're trying to gain followers, gain people who will follow their lead, follow their vision, follow the plans that they have for their company or their nation or whatever it is, or their whatever group might be involved. And so you have this kind of focus on the self, and spirituality starts by teaching the person that that you're going to have this concern for yourself. And part of it is part of your biology, part of it is instinctual, part of it is necessary because you need to kind of protect your physical self, protect your emotional self, protect your psychological self from, somebody actually physically attacking you or emotionally attacking you or psychologically attacking you, verbally attacking you, and things like that. And we have this fight or flight reaction. And we are often in this mode where we think everyone is out to get us. Everyone is out to, harm us in some way or undermine us or undermine our ideas or undermine our status or our position in a group, in a family, in a company, in a nation, and so on. And so we have this very kind of animal scanning of the environment to see what threats we might find. And we have this fight or flight or kind of reaction that we, when confronted with this threat, we're either going to fight or we're going to flee or we're going to do something. So when religion and spirituality come into the picture, they say, look, you are not bound by this fight or flight syndrome. You're not bound by these instinctual choices. The self that you have, in a soft way, you can hold on to it. In a soft way, you need it in order to distinguish yourself from other people, to distinguish yourself from members of your family, members of your community, and so on. But if you make it hard, if you harden the edges of that self, then it's going to become very problematic. Then you're going to start doing everything for that self. You're going to start, wanting other people to serve that self. You'll want other people to agree all the time with that self. You'll want other people to just, at some point, just roll over and obey that self. And you find this when you have certain, when you have a mother figure or a father figure that is very commanding and demands obedience, or you have a boss that is very commanding and demands obedience, or you have a religious leader or a political leader that is very commanding and demands that obedience. So you have this hardening of the self. And when spirituality comes in and it says that self that is hardened so much, it has to soften. It has to soften. The circle of concern that you have has to be first and foremost for others. Because it's only by thinking of others that the self that you have softens. And so we're not talking about throwing away the self, because you can't really throw away the self, because you have this body, right? You have this personality, and over the years you've developed all this, and you need all this to kind of interact in this in the world. So you have a name, you have a social security number, you have a driver's license, you have a social, cultural, national identity, and it's necessary, it's useful, but from a spiritual point of view, it has to soften. It can't be hard. It can't be heavy. You sometimes are aware of certain personalities that are dominating and domineering. And those are some heavy personalities. And so you definitely don't want to be around them, and you definitely don't want to be one of them. And so that your spirituality can be there to help soften that self, soften the idea that there is anything permanent or continuous or long lasting about this self. This self is just a way of relating to others. And it can be fluid, it can be dynamic, it can be, it can change based on, who you're talking to. I'll give you an example. When you are talking to your parents, you have one self, right? Yes, mom. No, mom. No, dad. Yes, dad. When you're talking to your friends, you have another kind of self. Hey, So you're like you're in another place, and when you're at work, you're like in a meeting and you're presenting something, and you're saying, okay, in this quarterly report, we have found an increase of 25%. You're in a different self, right? When you're on vacation on the beach, sitting back in the sand, watching your kids playing, you're in another self. So you have actually multiple selves. There's not one self. There's not this one kind of tight, hard, container of everything that you are. You actually have multiple selves, and you switch and glide in between all of them depending on the situation you're in. But at the center of all of them is the being that you are. The being doesn't change. The being is. The selves become. They are part of your becoming. And so when you see certain teachings that say, don't act in an egotistic manner, what it's saying is the ego is just a shorthand for hardened self, fixed self, rigid self, And so we have certain teachings that say soften the self, soften the selves, plural. And, this goes into the idea of what the Prophet said. A Muslim is someone who wants for his brother or his sister what he wants for himself or what she wants for herself. And so you are not one of these selves, you are that being. And you recognize the being of other people. And so what you want for them. What you don't want for them. So your happiness is mirrored in their happiness, and your disappointment and sadness is mirrored in their disappointment and sadness. So the being that you are is the kind of focal point of who you are, whereas the selves that you exhibit, that you show up as in the world, are just masks. They're just flexible kind of masks, and they're made of very flexible paper or plastic or rice paper or something like this. They don't have to be hard. They don't have to be hard. And so all our movement in the world, all our ambition in the world, all our striving in the world doesn't have to be to make this one hardened self achieve, accomplish, go up the ladder, beat everybody else, compete, so win, get up there at number one at all costs and make everyone lose so that you can win. That model doesn't work. It has never worked. It hasn't worked 10,000 years ago, and it will not work 10,000 years from now. Trying to get this self to be this achiever, the ladder is on the wrong wall. There's a popular kind of euphemism, story, phrase that says, I climbed the corporate ladder my entire life, and then only later did I realize that it was leaned up against the wrong wall. And so what we've got there is a situation where the one hardened self is trying to get up that ladder, step up that ladder, and at the expense of everybody else. And so spirituality comes in and says, look, you can still be in the world and learn and improve and reach for and strive for, but you can do it with the spirit and sense that all your fellow brothers and sisters are coming with you. They are coming with you. You're all in the boat together. It's not just you that's going to win, and get that Olympic gold medal. In the spiritual Olympics, we're trying to make sure everybody gets the gold medal. And that might sound sentimental and a little woo-woo and, all of this, but that's actually God's plan. That's actually the plan for everyone to win, for everyone to get the gold. And so if you're able to really strive and make leaps and bounds and, your job as a Muslim who wants for his brother and sister what he wants for himself, your job is to want that gold for your brother and for your sister and for your children and your parents and your grandparents, and your neighbors and your cousins and people living in countries far, far away. You want for them what you want for yourself. And that's what makes you a Muslim, because you are not thinking in terms of that rigid ego, that rigid self. You're thinking in terms of that being that is pure and holy and that is here for a purpose. And that purpose is to strive toward Allah and bring your family with you and bring your brothers and sisters with you and bring everyone with you, even if you don't know them, you haven't met them, you don't know their names, you don't personally know them, but that's okay because they're here with you on the planet. So you can bring them along, and that striving, that moving forward is a kind of collective effort that we all make. And so in a race like that, where everyone is going to win and everyone's going to get the gold, it's a joyful race. It's a joyful striving toward unfolding and unpacking the blessings of Allah. And there is no room here for being the sole hero. There's no room here. The sole Olympic gold medalist. There's no room. We're all Olympians and we're all going for the gold. And the gold that we're going for is to unpack and unwrap and share the gifts and talents that Allah has given us. So in that framework, the ego has no role to play. You can have around your being soft selves, right? You can have soft selves, self for your parents, self for business, self for your spouse, self for your kids, self for your friends. You have different self circles, and they're all soft, and they can change, and they're flexible, right? And there's nothing self-absorbed here. There's nothing selfish here. There's nothing egotistical here. There is just this open being that is playful. And so your commitment to strive for more is really to strive for more so that you can help others. Not that you are the sole beneficiary and you leave everyone behind. We strive to help others. And that is a part of our spiritual practice.